What's up, team? Morning, Joe. Morning, McTimmy. Morning, Kevin. Good morning. I'm about to buy some Bitcoin and a little micro strategy. Wow, Kevin, it's a happy new year to you for that. But the sun, coffee, and Bitcoin, indeed. The sun, as you can see, totally up. Bitcoin running fine. All that's left to do is have a coffee and talk about what's new. Mental health. We're going to talk about mental health today, right? What goes into mental health. You know, we call this show The Breakup because it's all about psychology. We are uninterested in trading dollars for Bitcoin. It has nothing to do with it, right? You can buy as much. We hear Kevin this morning saying he's about to buy some Bitcoin. That's fine, right? We love buying Bitcoin. But this show is absolutely not about buying Bitcoin. Buying Bitcoin is as normal for this show as just breathing, let's say, right? What we're really talking about is getting rid of the mindset that comes with dollars and replacing it with a mindset that comes with Bitcoin. And what does that mean, mindset? I mean, you know, there's a lot of ways to define that. There's a lot of ways to think about it. But what we're going to talk about today are the chemicals in your brain, right? The happy chemicals in your brain that actually lead to mental health. Because if you actually compare the two situations, fiat versus Bitcoin, you'll see that the induction and the creation of these different happiness hormones, happiness chemicals in your brain are impossible with the fiat system as it is today, or at least no longer conjuring them for most people. So what are we talking about exactly? It actually happened that I got some of my equipment back. We're not quite set up with the way we wanted to set up the studio today. You'll get it tomorrow. For some reason, I have no idea why, but the iPhone just simply would not be read yet. My iMac, the one I have here, as a camera. But I did get my stuff back yesterday, and this is what gave me the idea. The whiteboard is coming back, folks, but I saw the last whiteboard I left. It's a bit scribbled over and all that. This piece here was just something I did on, that was around the time that Will Smith slapped Chris Rock, if you remember. So that's his ideas of how to run media. But these ones here, dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins are what we're going to talk about today. So strangely, you know, it's a time capsule thing. I don't have my markers yet. That's why we don't have the whiteboard going today. But when I got my stuff back yesterday, seeing the board, as I left it, when I left here last April to go to Bitcoin 2022 in Miami, which last year was in April, this was the last board that I had, and that's when I was doing the show primarily as part of the Bitcoin Magazine live broadcast, and I would come on as a guest, and we'd do this for 20, 25 minutes. So it was the previous season version, and that's a previous season board, but nevertheless, those four different chemicals are what we're going to talk about today. And dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphins, if you don't know, those are the chemicals that, if released in your brain, will lead to happiness. They're the literal definition of happiness. And we can see through the different ways people live, living as a Bitcoiner, living as a fiat person, there's avenues and opportunities for all of these chemicals to be released in your brain. And what we're going to do today is really just compare the news of the day and how much of these things can be conjured if you just follow the different, let's say, narratives, right? So dopamine, right? The way I think about dopamine in terms of fiat versus Bitcoin is really, and dopamine, the dopamine dealers, I often say, are one of the largest obstacles to hyper-Bitcoinization. Much more insidious than nation states, much more insidious than regulators, much more insidious than guns, right? We have a big issue with men with guns and violence and what an impediment that is for Bitcoinization, for hyper-Bitcoinization. But the dopamine dealers are the more insidious ones. They're the ones who use hypnotism, and basically they're the ones who can get you addicted to bad habits. So, and not only addicted to bad habits, they can lower your ability to focus. You know, one of the biggest things that has gone undiscussed, untalked about in the world as it is today is our increasingly shortened attention spans. I've noticed it for myself. I do a lot to maintain a larger attention span, and this show is an exercise in making sure I have an attention span that I can still share with people, right? This is sort of like a physical exercise. I think of this as a physical exercise to a certain extent, mental exercise, but it allows me to um, organize thoughts that are quite complicated, but require you to sit down and think about it for a second. So in the time that I take to produce the show every morning, I'm basically writing a story, beginning, middle, and end. And that exercise every day is really healthy. And for me anyway, allows me to avoid the dopamine delivery systems that are being uh, marketed to you daily. And by dopamine delivery systems, what I basically mean is the dopamine dealers are the folks who say, get outraged for this and get angry about that. And if you think this way, you're a better person than another person, and therefore think this way because everyone who doesn't think like you is stupid. And that's the dopamine delivery system at work. When we see the self-righteousness involved in certain movements and certain ideas, what you see there is the dopamine delivery system running on full speed, full capacity. But what happens when the dopamine system can't compete, let's say, right? So the dopamine delivery system works really well when we're talking about racism. It talks really well when we're talking about inequality, communism. Communism almost entirely built off a dopamine reward system of thinking a certain way and being rewarded for thinking that way. Usually that you're a better person than another. So that dopamine delivery system continues to be one of our largest obstacles. It's what almost all of social media is about. Instagram, of course, is one of the great dopamine delivery systems in the world. TikTok being the most important ever invented, I would say, dopamine delivery system when it comes to information. But what we see now, let's just compare and contrast, right? Dopamine, people want it. They crave it no matter what. And the fiat system gave it to you in spades for eating, for all kinds of things, right? You were rewarded for watching advertisements and feeling good about whatever product it is that you had decided would make you happy, right? So that dopamine delivery system is a major obstacle for Bitcoiners, because the part that's relevant to Bitcoiners is Bitcoiners' intense focus on time preference. Right? When we compare Austrian economics with everything else, remember, Austrian economics isn't about math. It is about time preference. It's about psychology. It's about folks and their ability to delay gratification for something. And when I think of dopamine and time preference, and I do think of Bitcoiners as folks who are in it for the long haul, right? Bitcoiners, it's not about what happens today in the market. It really is about what happens in 5 years, 10 years, and our ability to move the sticks in World War III, to change the world, to change people's perception, and to fight against the dopamine dealers, because the dopamine dealers are part of the problem here. But here's the story today. And this is something that Glenn Greenwald has underlined. So we've talked a lot about Twitter files on the show. We predicted from day one, if you recall, when the Twitter files just began, we said immediately, these are going to be the reactions. It's going to be Elon Musk is bad, Matt Taibbi's an idiot, Barry Weiss is stupid. It was going to be attack the people, right? But then the other tactic, which I said from day one, I said you would see this consistently. They're going to ignore it. They're going to ignore this stuff. We talked about it yesterday. The whole idea that it's too much psychologically for some people makes it easy to ignore. We talked about how future shock is a real thing, right? Future shock and the pain that comes from having to reorganize the world you've already created in your mind. Breakups in relationships, right? Breakups, when people break up. One of the hardest things about a breakup is letting go of the castles you've built in your mind and the future you've created in your mind with that person. So that's one of the hardest parts about breakups, is that you've got to use your brain to reimagine a future that you'd already designed. So that's the really hard part, right? And when things like this with the Twitter files happen, we get a chance to really see the horses racing, fiat versus Bitcoin, because the system that supports fiat is incapable of looking at the Twitter files. And that's a really interesting opening. So Glenn Greenwald points out again that this is continuing, right? So he talked about the abuse of censorship and FBI and Adam Schiff and all that stuff in his show last night. So he's got this show that we've been talking about a lot here, but is finally running on all cylinders. So System Update is the name of the show on Rumble. We're trying to get a lot of the Rumble folks to Bitcoin 2023 in Miami, May 18th to 20th. I continue to believe that one of our biggest differentiating factors for our event is that we're going to get so many independent journalists, independent content creators, because they're more and more becoming super relevant and more relevant than celebrities, more relevant than mainstream media channels for sure. And so that's one reason why I'm focusing on trying to get those folks. I'm talking with Barry Weiss, I'm talking with the Daily Wire folks, Rumble being one that I think we could really get close with, because Rumble treats Bitcoin Magazine very, very well on its platform. We're generally their news, financial news head story above the fold when you get to that section. So there's a lot of reasons why we would want to work with them. But that's not what we're here to talk about, although the programming for the event is very interesting. Glenn Greenwald remarking that it's a total media blackout now. Total media blackout on Twitter files. They're not even bothering criticizing Matt Taibbi anymore. They've tried that to the end. They're not bothering with criticizing Elon Musk when it comes to this stuff. It's just ignored. You couldn't even find it in the news yesterday. It wasn't even there, right? And the problem with that is you're no longer playing the game of this dopamine delivery race, right? The delivery of dopamine in this case, when you were able to criticize Matt Taibbi or criticize Elon Musk, was at least participating in the game, because they got the little treat, right? Oh, what a fat ding, you get your dopamine, right? So the dopamine dealers ran out of fuel. They had no way to keep fighting it. Now it's just total ignorance. And that's a very difficult position to be in, because it is a race. It is a race. And for those in the Bitcoin world, when it does come to time preference, we're just catching up so quickly right now to the folks that would otherwise be enraged and engaged all the time. So when they can't even see something, it's actually a really good opportunity for Bitcoiners to make up ground and change things without anyone really noticing, because that's what's happening. We're changing mindsets all over the place right now because of this stuff. The dopamine dealers, when it comes to media outrage narrative, are on the ropes. And that means we're taking a little section of the whole dopamine field and opening up people's eyes to time preference, delayed gratification, and the ability to build something better. You know, the whole point, as I always say, about Bitcoin, and even our difference with crypto and our difference, of course, with fiat, and the way fiat and crypto are so similar, is that they still continue to imagine a world of financial engineers, high IQ people trading, and they're going to add computer science to the quant skills already, and an IQ of 130 won't quite be enough to beat inflation and the dopamine dealers. You're going to need an IQ of like 140, 150, right? You've got to be a trader and a computer science expert. Of course, Bitcoiners reject that entire future as one dominated by the short dopamine dealers and the folks who would like to get you addicted to outrage and all those other things. Because, of course, Bitcoin doesn't want more financial engineers. We want the best and brightest to go into making chairs, right? Making a phone that will easily tie to a computer made by the same manufacturer who advertise constantly about how easy it is to run a phone and a thing, right? On your same system. That's supposed to be the point. You know, I was at it for over an hour this morning trying to get these stupid things to work, and they didn't want to work. We'll see. We'll get there. We'll get there. But that's, you know, a big difference and a big advantage now. So on dopamine, right? On dopamine, making ground. Bitcoin folks are able to intellectualize these questions. We're able to hold our breath, if you will, as all the Twitter files are released. They're going back in time. We're already at the Trump inauguration. We're seeing the Trump administration and how it was treated by Twitter in its context. We're seeing how the intelligence community infiltrated, found a very useful manipulatable entity, and one that would be trained itself on dopamine delivery and reward responses. So once that was clear that Joel Roth and all of these other folks would listen to regulators and intelligence community officials, it was open season. And any little story that fed the beast of Trump hatred, of Republican hatred, of self-righteousness, of all those issues, easily had a path forward. But now when they ignore it, they allow the folks who were patient, allow the folks who have this large time preference to have waited a whole administration of Trump. Years after the administration of Trump, we heard all about Russia collusion forever, and always knowing that it wasn't worth arguing, right? None of it was worth arguing, right? You know, one thing I mentioned the other day about Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire, I'm more interested in Jeremy Boring because I do find some of these Daily Wire talent, as much as I find them entertaining, they're in the dopamine delivery game. And I will take one issue with Ben Shapiro in particular. You know, he's famous for that saying, facts don't care about your feelings. He has it 100% backwards. It's 100% backwards. His feelings don't care about facts at all. Zero, not even a little bit, right? And if people feel this way about certain things, because the dopamine has been injected into their brains, they're going to continue to feel that way. So again, arguments won't matter in this case, but ignoring something altogether is devastating for the case, where the Bitcoiners now can build their case, and you see in the end that patience, that reluctance to buy a narrative, the reluctance to buy a story, allows Bitcoiners to still have their worldview intact. They didn't have to adapt. They didn't have to rebuild the future. Eventually, most Bitcoiners believe, as I do, we're all going to be able to talk about the Trump presidency and the 2020 election openly with everyone. We're still not there. I said it when you didn't really know what was going on in the days after the 2020 election. I said, this won't be over until we can talk about all of this in the open. Right? We can talk about Russia collusion. We can talk about the 2020 election. We won't be anywhere until we can talk about that stuff in the open. So we're getting there. We're getting there. And patience is paying off. So that's just dopamine, right? The next one is the oxytocin. So does anyone know what the oxytocin is sort of known as? It's the love molecule, right? That's what they call it, the love chemical, or the love hormone in this case. And that's from physical touch, right? Physical touch. So you get that from touching your partner, from touching, children are hardwired that their parents' touch will deliver this oxytocin every time when they're babies. When you just pick them up out of the bassinet, they get that injection of happy love feeling. You can see the degradation of kids in orphanages that are ignored all the time. They can actually tell from the light scans, the EKG scans in their brain, that their brains are literally less luminescent, literally. I mean, they can tell there's less, because thoughts, in the end, thoughts escape your brain as vectors of light. And that's why we can read thoughts coming out of the brain. And those thoughts coming out of the brain, when they're especially strong and powerful and induced by love and other things like that, that is oxytocin. So you can see it escaping your brain as light. And that's why you can measure light off of the brain. And that's why, indeed, they say that AI can, in fact, read thoughts. I haven't seen it in proof yet, but there are folks who have been close enough to the technology that say, yeah, it's pretty simple, actually. They know what you're thinking just because that's the language they speak, so it's not a problem. In my book, The Satoshi Wedding Murders, which you should be able to read shortly, we're involving AI in our process. Of course, we use AI assistants now because that's what the book predicts, right? We predicted our best friends would be AI as we go forward, and they would be our biggest help. So I'm going to try and produce a bunch more stuff around the book, collateral, marketing, stuff like that, with the help of AI. And so that's why we can measure it, right? That's why we can measure. But it's not just physical touch. It also comes from community, the sense of being together, being in something as a team, being in a foxhole. We heard all the types of brotherhood that came with war, World War I and World War II. All those things were the foundation of modern American patriotism. But stop for a second and look what's going on right now in US Congress with the Republicans in particular. Look what's happening with the, we don't need to get to the details of the stupid speaker not getting elected 9 times and everyone's fighting and what does it mean and how did this happen? How has it gone on this long? And it's never happened in 100 years that a speaker wasn't elected on the first shot and it shouldn't be like this. Well, look what Trump actually did, right? Remember what Trump did. And when in the early days of the Trump presidency, there were still folks that I get why some people like him, but why is it that some people love Trump? Where does that come from? How can anyone love this guy, right? Well, as someone who loved Trump, the reason I loved him was because he broke up the Republican Party, right? It didn't need to be a big happy gang again at all. My impression of Trump to this day was he only really needed to be in office for 2 days, and that made all the difference. And I'm not even counting his record as president, which I think will stand as one of the best ever, right? The things he accomplished, good and bad. I'm not saying it was all good, but he accomplished a lot in his 4 years. But the most important part of his presidency was the day he was elected because of the amount of brains it broke. Just that amount of brains that it broke. And the last day, of course, is also really important. It's why I don't support him anymore, right? Not giving a pardon to Ed Snowden and a few of the others. I still think that Assange, I'm happy that he's looking like he might have a trial. I'd prefer the trial than a pardon in Assange's case alone, because I think we can learn a lot from the trial. And I think I'm confident enough he would be innocent. So I wouldn't mind subjecting him to even more stress and trouble and all that stuff, because I think it would be better for the greater good. If he gets a pardon, he can be ignored again, right? But a trial would be very difficult to ignore. So I hope he does get extradited and is in America for the trial. But when Trump was there, it was a different world, because he could have, Assange and Ed Snowden could have made Trump's case for him, and he really ought just pardon him. So for me, the 2 days of the Trump presidency that are the most relevant are day 1 and the last day. But when it comes to the love of why people love Trump right now, I don't want him to be president again, but why people love him, it's because he destroyed the Bushes. He destroyed everyone who came in the Republican Party before. And what you see today, and now he's even supporting this guy who's not winning the speaker role, right? So I don't care about what Trump says or who he's supporting. None of that is important, right? As I said, Trump could have quit the day he was elected, and all the benefit of the Trump presidency would have been there, just due to the number of brains that were broken and the reaction and the schism it caused inside the Republican Party, because it allowed for all kinds of free radical behavior afterwards, right? There was no more unified uniparty that was capable of existing with 2 parties that were trained like dogs to coordinate together. So that 1 day of just Trump getting elected, the inauguration, that one period was enough. And we see the results of it today, right? The Republicans now are completely undergoing this civil war. And whether McCarthy wins or doesn't really matter, right? But you can even see things like, you get Kinzinger, right? Kinzinger, he was the Republican who ran all of this anti-Trump, January 6th, blah, blah, blah. And of course, he wasn't able to get reelected. Now, I think he's got some mental health issues, honestly. I really do. I think he went and served America in Iraq. I don't think anyone who went to that war came back a normal person, right? I think he's got some PTSD troubles. I don't know what his mental problems are at all, so I'm not going to diagnose him from far. I think he's missing some of these dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and endorphin stuff, that's for sure. But now he's signed up with CNN to do the same old job, right? Look at the stupid Republicans, and they don't get it, and they're dumb. If they would just be like me, everything would be fine. But the good news is they broke that open. And in the end, what has happened? That Republicans, I would say, were those people that were the most patriotic. Right? I'm not saying there aren't Democrat patriots. I don't want to say that at all. Right? I'm not trying to put a monopoly on patriotism in the Republican Party. There's all forms of patriotism. But your typical bread and butter patriot, the cliche patriot, was a Republican, right? He was a Republican. small government, have my gun, do my family stuff, blah, 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 right? So that was a major, major part. And that is now gone. The Republican parties cannot command that group of people any longer. And that sense of community that went around with that, that tribal sense of American patriotism infused with politics and as part of the political machine has been broken. It's just broken. Now there's patriots all over the place, but there is no more cajoling people by saying you're not a patriot unless you do that, right? That seems broken. That seems broken. And they can't really get any results. You've got the Republican who's still crying on television on CNN now. So any semblance of a cohesive unit here is gone. It's just fighting on this side. Look at the Democrats, right? You've got the squad, right? They fall in line a little more, but one can't imagine that everyone in the Democrat Party is happy with these huge spending bills. I know AOC voted for it, and I know AOC's bullied into not looking for any more peace plans in Ukraine and Russia by that other section of the Democrat Party. But nevertheless, what we've got is a situation where that community feeling is gone, right? And not on either side. There was nothing wrong with communities that were cohesive fighting each other. That's one thing. But even within that now, those two sides, Democrat and Republican, are broken into pieces. They might stay under one title, but that's the reason why we haven't been able to elect a new speaker on the first ballot for the first time in 100 and something years, because the Republicans are fracturing. And the sense of community, the patriotism that kept them all together is getting lost. This is good for Bitcoin because, as I've said a million times, there were elements of American patriotism that were obstacles to hyper-Bitcoinization in America. Some of those obstacles you wouldn't see in China, for example, right? China is not patriotic about the money. China's patriotic about the culture and the history. The money is just another thing, right? So that's one of it. But now, compare that to Bitcoiners. Right? Compare this community thing fracturing in the political sphere to Bitcoiners. Bitcoiners don't care what your politics are. No one cares. We can disagree all day, right? Do we agree on Bitcoin? Yes. Therefore, we're in this community. There's a tremendous amount of oxytocin that comes from being a Bitcoiner and joining this community. I mean, that's what this morning coffee together is all about, right? This isn't me doing a presentation about stuff I know, right? This is Bitcoiners coming together on this show. I see you every morning. We have our chats. We're here to talk about World War III and how Bitcoin fits in. Right? That's a community right there. And I don't care about any of those things that the mainstream media would bring up. I don't care if you're trans. I don't care. It doesn't matter. I don't care. Right? It's not important at all. I accept you for who you are, 100%. Right? And I think the same would go both ways. So we have a tremendous advantage when it comes to our cohesive community. We can fight, we can argue, but still we're aligned in a super important way. And you see it when you come to events, right? Bitcoin 2023, Bitcoin 2022. Remember, we were the first event in the world to gather, in the world, out of COVID. No one else met before Bitcoiners. Nobody. No one else on Earth. I promise you, I run events. I was out there trying to tell people, let's do an event here, let's do an event there, let's be first. There's going to be a lot of cachet in being first, right? The only folks that were willing to, as a group, ignore the mandates, ignore the mask laws, ignore the fear, were Bitcoiners. This was June 2021. Bitcoiners met in the thousands. They put aside fear, they put aside the judgment, the terrible accusations that were thrown at people that you don't care about others if you're going to travel, or you don't care if someone dies, you're selfish, you're going to travel. We didn't get manipulated by that stuff. We knew community getting together was one of the most important things, and I continue to think that instance will go down in history books. That's a kind of war effort that we achieved, right? To be the first group of people to meet in public without fear after COVID is going to be remarked by history, and we did it. And it hasn't stopped, right? We meet, we have our meetups, we have our culture. We're so successful in mimetic warfare for that reason. You remember, Trump used mimetic warfare to win, right? He used memes to beat and create this division within the Republican Party and to destroy the old tribes that did deliver a sense of belonging, did induce oxytocin for adherents and followers and members of the community. And now that's gone, right? Just 1 second. Sorry, guys. So you know, dopamine, Bitcoiners winning when it comes to folks ignoring the news and us being able to have an opportunity now to push the time preference argument, have more space to induce more time preference. When it comes to the oxytocin, again, you know, these other tribes, the fiat system falling apart, fighting, complicated, no one knows what's going on. How much ill will is there now towards the Fed because did they get it right? We don't know. It doesn't look like it, right? It doesn't look like they got anything right. It looks like they were off by months as far as raising rates to respond to what's going on in the market. You know, people have let the Federal Reserve be for years because of the privilege. Americans have let the Federal Reserve be for years because of the privilege it provided, right? Everyone else supporting and really subsidizing American debt, American consumption, right? That's what happened. The whole world subsidized it. So of course, no Americans were super angry at the Federal Reserve. It allowed their credit card balances to expand, right? So there's no problem with that. But now the world is changing really quickly, and the Federal Reserve has way more people questioning what it did. And now, not everyone has to understand what's going on, right? It's complicated stuff for sure. And but people will understand the shame of walking away from a grocery store with way less than you thought you would. That will be that's hard to ignore, right? A mother or a father who cooks for their family and is used to getting you know, a certain amount of this you know, serotonin. Well, we'll get to serotonin in a second, but a certain amount of pride from her family for or his family for creating such a nice meal has to now go to them with less. That's just what's happening, and that starts questioning all of these other institutions. So that's, again, good for Bitcoin, right? Good for Bitcoin. So we've got the Federal Reserve that is going to be questioned more and more. We've got the tribal bonds falling apart and whatever groups still supported the fiat world. Contrast that with Bitcoin, where we're coming together more and more. The memes are getting more powerful, and we're able to communicate in a much denser way for longer periods of time. So it's going great. That's going good, right? Serotonin, right? Serotonin is the next one, right? So we have dopamine, we've got the oxytocin, we've got the serotonin, right? They say serotonin is gut health. Right? That's a lot of where food is relevant. That's where exercise is relevant. And it's also where fear comes from. Right? So fear and exercise and the ability to manage those things are actually linked. And people who are overwhelmed with fear, right? It's actually that part of the serotonin that is affected, right? So the serotonin helps you with the good mood feeling, and it does come from that feeling you get from suntanning or from exercise, and that feeling you get right after, right? It's a part of it, right? Eating healthy is a big part of it, right? So now we get people questioning the experts, like I mentioned, the Federal Reserve. I mentioned the mother, right? An embarrassing meal because of inflation. Right? Shame, or the father, an embarrassing meal because of inflation. Right? Your own children saying, "What the heck is this crap?" Right? Why did I order this chicken backs? What's going on? I thought I was getting chicken fingers, right? So the exercise and eating right is a big part of it. And if you look at yesterday, we talked about this story around Lucky Charms, right? That luckily a lot of people spoke about that yesterday. Everyone talking about the Lucky Charms in the food pyramid, getting a higher score than beef and getting a higher score than eggs and milk So, this angle of eating well, and it really helps fuse Bitcoin's oxytocin community piece with the serotonin, eating well and exercising piece. Of course, Bitcoiners big into lifting weights, big into eating steak, being carnivores, ignoring health experts who would tell you otherwise. These things are good or bad, right? Every Bitcoiner, the reason why we were able to even have the first event out of COVID in 2021 was because most Bitcoiners said, well, I'm not going to wait for medicine. I'm going to get in shape. I'm going to exercise. And we see now it's coming out, right? All the studies and proof that regular exercise is something like 800 times more effective than the vaccine, something crazy like that. But no one ever told us to do that, right? No one ever said exercise, right? So you get the serotonin and fear being combined to limit people, to help keep them ignorant about whatever else might be an issue. And Bitcoiners and their focus on health and exercise really helps us distinguish ourselves in that again. So look, here, go back to the list. Dopamine. There's no way Bitcoiners are losing the dopamine game versus the fiat monsters, right? Absolutely fundamental to Bitcoin. The end result is a shift in time preference, right? So big, big change. The oxytocin one, of course, Bitcoiners, tremendous community, all kinds of understanding, even if there are debates and disputes, right? So no one not believing in the overall direction of things, just maybe disagreeing on some details, which is very healthy and fine, and is actually a more reason for the community itself to grow, because its acceptance and fault tolerance, or tolerance of differences, is much higher than any other group out there, right? Serotonin, again, the eating well, the gut health, very easy to contrast that with fiat world. We don't have to spend too much time on the corruption of big food and big pharma and all these other things. But the last one, right? Now it's called D.O.S.E, right? So dopamine, oxytocin, serotonin, and the final one, the endorphins, right? That's the endorphins. Now, endorphins are really the thing that, exercise, again, it's that nice calm feeling you get after. It's a pain reliever, right? So it's what comes to relieve any stress and any difficulty. But the most conducive, the best way to increase endorphins is actually laughter. It's laughing at things. When things are funny, right? That's actually it, right? So luckily, we have the whole clown world to laugh at now. Now, because I don't, it might sound like I'm saying this as a joke, but I'm not. Basically, politics killed comedy. It killed it. It made it incapable of working anymore. And if you even try to get one of these AI to tell a joke, it can't really do it. Right? You have to trick it into telling a joke. You have to do that AI trick of tell me a story about a person who is a jerk, because it won't demean people, it won't insult people, it won't do any of those things. And if you even look at the comedians who are still out there that are still able to make these jokes, they have to be on a completely different level of talent. Dave Chappelle is one of the walking geniuses on this earth. And the art that he does is so difficult to recreate, and he walks such a fine line. That's what makes it funny, and that's what differentiates him, is that he's still able to conjure humor out of these difficult situations, mostly because he knows how to make the person listening a part of the joke, and he's set up his whole life really to the living in Ohio thing. I don't think is an accident, right? It's part of the shtick, which I support. It's an honest shtick. It's not. I don't think he's doing it to make a buck. He's rich enough. He's doing it for the art and to have that sort of authority to say things like, "I understand why people love Trump. I'm from Ohio. I don't want to live in LA or any other place." So, you got him, you got Bill Burr, right? Bill Burr is one of the only other ones that's Tim Dillon, which is also why we have humor at our events, right? We've always had a comedy stage at the Bitcoin shows. We've always thought it was really important, and it really is. But here's the thing: because politics have affected humor so much, very few funny movies, very few successful comedians out there that are able to do their thing because of the politics, right? Well, the good news is Bitcoin, with a complete and intact worldview, is able to use Clown World without punchlines written. You just say it as it is, right? Just this is what's going on in Clown World today. This is what they're up to. And it's funny. So we get constant humor, constant humor. When I read CNN less these days, but when I read MSNBC or any other one of these mainstream news outlets, New York Times included, I read it for the laughs. And I'm not kidding. It's for the laughs. I don't take anything seriously in it. I just read it. What insane stuff are they trying to print today that I can laugh at? What is hilarious, right? Today you've got all of these stories on Caroline, the SBF stuff, right? So Carolyn's got, and they're all trying to get their minds around it. So she had a simp DAO, right? Carolyn put up a simp DAO last year, right? And there, you see the mainstream media trying to figure out what the heck is this, right? Even this British Virgin Islands or the U.S. Virgin Islands story, where the AG was fired when the AG was looking into the Epstein stuff, right? Now, I said I was the only person who talked about that story 2 days ago. Yesterday, people caught up. So I saw a lot of stories on it yesterday. So luckily, it's not getting ignored. But it's pretty funny that they tried to do this, right? I mean, I find this hilarious. It's sad in a way, but it's still pretty funny that, you see Biden getting on a flight. Oh, I'm going on an impromptu vacation to the Virgin Islands for Christmas, right? He lands in the Virgin Islands, right? He doesn't know where he is half the time. And he's sitting there, where am I? And what ends up happening? Oh, just a little AG, the attorney general, fired because she was suing JP Morgan for aiding the transactions of Epstein's crimes. And that just gets ignored. It's just no one cares. I mean, it's funny. Come on. If you can't laugh at that, if we can't sit around as Bitcoiners and laugh at corrupt AGs and banks sucking money out of human trafficking and the other stuff, I mean, what are we doing here, right? Now, there's sad stuff involved, but that's what makes it funny. I'm sorry. I mean, I have all the time in the world for the victims. None of that is what I'm laughing at. I want nothing but those people to get satisfaction one day, and I hope they do. So I'm not laughing at their misfortune at all. I'm laughing at Clown World's reaction to it. This is the world that some people want to support, that would completely ignore the victims of these crimes, completely ignore them, right? That would think it's normal for a president to take an impromptu Christmas vacation to the U.S. Virgin Islands, and miraculously, another Epstein bailout happens, right? Another Epstein bailout happens. But what is it? Why is it a bailout? Well, he had the bailout when he got out of jail the first time. You guys know who put him back in jail, by the way. I don't know if everyone knows that. It's Cernovich. Mike Cernovich is a lawyer. I don't know if a lot of people realize. Cernovich is the guy who found out the reasons for which he was released early and got him back in where he was. That's Cernovich, right? So, yeah, and Bud Perry says, if you don't laugh at this stuff, you would have to cry. It's exactly it. Yeah, if you don't laugh at this, you would have to cry. But luckily, we can laugh at it, right? We actually can laugh at it. And it's funny. It's funny that you got SBF and Caroline and simp DAOs and where did the money go? We just gave Ukraine hundreds of millions, billions of dollars, and where did that go? We don't know, but SBF and no one cares. And he's going to go to jail. He didn't give enough. But what happened to the Epstein folks and were they connected? And we don't know. But it's funny. It's all funny. And it's great. For us, it's great. Right? Now, if you take this stuff seriously, it's really bad news, right? If you take the U.S. presidency, and then you have to start contemplating that criminals are in charge, right? Well, some people aren't ready to do that. For us, we can just laugh at it all. and that's great. We can laugh at all of this stuff. So for me, the dopamine, the oxytocin, the serotonin, the endorphins, all of that, right? I think we're winning the fight. Like brain-wise, we're ahead. We have healthier brains. And that's enough, I think, to win World War III. We're just more capable. We're going to inherit a different world, and these folks are going to be paralyzed by fear and lacking in any sense of community, no oxytocin being released, right? At a certain point, the dopamine has to run out, as it did with the Twitter files, right? They can't keep selling, oh, Elon Musk is an asshole, oh, Barry Weiss is an idiot, oh, Matt Taibbi is stupid, right? They ran out of that juice. Another reason why it's so clever that Elon has been releasing this stuff slowly. I like the slow drip, because if you did it all at once, then the people who were worried they would be in there would just check it, see their name is not in there, and then go on the offensive and attack it. But now he's got everyone waiting around. Am I going to be in the next one? Is it going to be me next time? So he's keeping a lot of people from being able to even engage. Therefore, the only fight is to just ignore, which is opening up the road for competitors of alternate worldviews like Bitcoiners. So that's big news, right? And put it all together, right? Put it all together. So the forces that would otherwise keep us down, right, would be things like petrodollar and the war machine. Well, we see the war stuff is changing a lot, right? Drones and all that changing it. We even got Henry Kissinger today, right? Henry Kissinger, the architect of the petrodollar, offering this morning, I don't know if you guys saw it, he wrote it in a British newspaper, his peace plan. So Henry Kissinger, the actual architect of the petrodollar, the man who created it, the man whose idea it was to close oil markets to just the US dollar, thereby forcing everyone to keep US dollars in reserve to pay for their energy needs, today offered the following solution in Ukraine, Russia. He said, go back to the lines that were drawn last year at this time before the war started. So give Donbass and Crimea to Russia, give the rest of Ukraine, let Ukraine now join NATO. That's no longer an issue, he says, right, with the Nordic countries joining, like Finland. The idea of just having Ukraine not in NATO being the reason why we'd have a war anymore, he says, is gone. So make them part of NATO, no problem. But here's the thing: by letting, and he says we got to let Russia be as it is. We need to let them offer a way out, basically, for them, so that they can retake their role in the global system. What he's basically saying is we need to close down the alternate energy markets that aren't denominated in US dollars in order to sustain the petrodollar. Or he's saying, right, it's one of the two, I can't mind reading him. So he's saying either we maintain the petrodollar through this peace plan, right? But that's out of his hands. If we give the peace plan and let Russia survive, will they go back to the petrodollar? He doesn't say that. I think he's just hoping it in the article, but I mind reading when I say that. In fact, it doesn't matter, because by him asking it to survive, saying Russia needs to not be degraded, it needs an exit plan, it needs an off-ramp from this conflict to save face and whatever, which I've been saying for a while, like you've got to offer off-ramps. And that's what he said we did wrong in World War I, and millions died because no off-ramps were being offered. He says, you've got to offer the off-ramp. If they do offer the off-ramp, it's more or less the end of the world system as we know it, because the petrodollar is dead. Russia has proven that it can maintain its economy without printing money, right? So they never printed money in this whole ordeal when their bank reserves were taken and all that stuff. And they found takers for their product without US dollars. So everyone's buying Russian oil, buying Russian oil in England at a huge premium because they have to go through third parties like India. So Russia sells the oil to India and India sells it back to England. It's amazing, right? So what's happening is the no matter what, the petrodollar is about to be affected in a way that will make the future very different. And this is coming from the architect of the petrodollar. If he's saying that times are so tough that we've even got to risk the death of the petrodollar because it will be Russia's discretion whether or not it re-supports the system, and one can't imagine it would. They had their money stolen, sanctions, all that, but it proved it could survive those things. So from here, that's a big change. But here's the one last piece of news that won't, I think, even make a difference whether the petrodollar survives or not. And this is the stuff I always wait for. This is the big news of the day as far as I'm concerned. No matter what else you're hearing in the news, this is the #1 story. So GE Hitachi, Hitachi is the Japanese brand, and they've combined with GE to make a nuclear reactor. And it's a small modular nuclear. And it finally got, let me see if I have the full story here. Yes, I do. There it is. So the GE Hitachi reactor, someone here says that someone on Twitter, I have his name. Anyway, he's a great follow when it comes to nuclear energy, but for some reason I clipped the image without his name saved. Anyway, it's from Power Mag, and the GE reactor is apparently the greatest producing, most efficient small modular nuclear reactor ever, and it finally went through the process in UK and is going to get its permit there, and it looks like the United States and Canada are going to streamline their approval processes after the British do it. So it looks like they might be able to get all of these out at once much faster than we ever did before. And it looks like, just based on the price per unit, it's much cheaper than its competitors. So this is a very cheap reactor, 300 megawatts boiling water, small modular nuclear reactor. So 300 megawatts, that's probably like 5 or 6 major Bitcoin mines, right? The biggest one I know around my place in Canada is 50 megawatts. Where you see me broadcast, they've got a big mine not far from me. That one there is, this would be 6 of those. So it can handle 6 times that. And these are going to be in the low billions to buy, right? So next market cycle up, we're going to own them. McTimmy says, time to take over the RECOT structure. That's where we got to go, McTimmy. It's all about the RECOT structure. If they don't let us here in America, we got to go to the RECOT structure immediately. I want to put a nuclear reactor right in the middle, and a Bitcoin mine right in the middle. If you read my book to the end, you'll see it all. It's all there. Regina says, BTC gang. Oh yeah, here guys, Daniel made a Telegraph group for the breakup, and for everyone to chat outside of the live show if anyone's interested. I think that's a great idea. I'm so happy that Daniel did this. So we'll meet on there sometimes. I'm going to talk to the Bitcoin Magazine folks too, just about getting a discount code for folks who watch the show a lot, and we'll definitely do a live show at the event, May 18th to 20th, and we'll definitely hang out there like we hang out here. It'd be cool to do it all live together one morning. I'd like that a lot. All right, team. See you tomorrow. I should have this set up. I'll have more time tomorrow. Let me see if I got new messages here. Yeah. We should have anyone not on Nostra stats are falling into new hands. Cool to explore. Yeah, I'm gonna do my Nostra stuff today. I needed to get this desktop set up. That's what's kept me. I've been traveling and moving around and wasn't able to get this desktop set up. So I'm definitely gonna get my Nostra stuff set up today, and hopefully get my camera set up. So I won't be on this Mac camera. All right, team. Peace. See you tomorrow. Thanks for coming today.